All right, guys. So sorry about yesterday. I was stuck at work. I thought that I was going to be able to get off in order to do the post game, but being on set is notoriously unpredictable, and so I was not able to. How are you guys doing? We beat Saudi Arabia 1-0 in a game where, frankly, we played quite poorly. The context of the game being that Saudi Arabia, who was also missing a lot of starters, this was maybe their between A and B team, came to us and sat back in a defensive block, knowing that that's what we struggle to do, right? We struggle to break down heavy blocks. And we struggled against Saudi Arabia to do that. We created very little. We had a lot of possession, particularly down the left. I think they scouted us very well because they said, give the ball to Max Arsene. There is no threat there. And so Arsene got a lot of the ball in this game and predictably did very little with it. There were several reasons why we struggled to create chances against this Saudi team, specifically against this Saudi low block. But specifically, we didn't move the ball quick enough. You know, it was a very slow, ponderous buildup. Every time we had the ball, it was very much, pass here, pass there, take 2, 3, 4, 5 touches. And the problem with that is it allowed Saudi Arabia to move that block around to wherever the ball was, and they had plenty of time to do so. When you're trying to rip apart a block, you have to move the ball quickly. And when we tried to move the ball quickly, what happened? We didn't have the players to be able to do that well under any kind of pressure. If Agyemang is your target man, right, then that's a problem. If Arsene seems to be your primary playmaker, even though he wasn't playing as a 10, he was a guy who had probably more of the ball than anybody else and did nothing with it. Very predictable, very easy to shut down. Thankfully, for us, Chris Richards stepped up on both sides of the ball, defensively and in the attack, and scored that winning goal. Otherwise, that had 0-0 written all over it. And frankly, without some of his defensive work, it could have been 1-0 to Saudi Arabia as well. So someone says, where is the taller and better-looking version of Tom Cruise? He is work today. He tacted 4 hours of streaming yesterday. Let's let him be. We don't want to overwork the guy. There's still a lot more soccer to be played. But this was just me trying to do something for the game because I wasn't able to do it yesterday, and I still did want to cover it. I was able to watch it again this morning. I watched it a bit on set, but, it's hard to focus and concentrate on your phone when you're waiting for them to call you, I watched it again this morning, and I'll cover it on Patreon as usual. But it was a game where it makes you wonder how this roster was put together, right? Why didn't we bring, Eustachio, Porto looks like they're going to be knocked out, right, of the Club World Cup. And then Eustachio is going to come from Porto and play with Canada. Their whole thing is we want to get every player that we can to give ourselves the best shot of winning this, regional tournament, which for better or for worse, along with the Nations League, is our regional tournament. And we are not good enough at this time to turn our noses up at this tournament, at the Gold Cup, okay? If we'd been winning nonstop, sure. I mean, you still have to go and win it, right? But we are not good enough, and this team has not built up enough goodwill and credit with the fans to turn their noses up at this tournament, like some of our players did. But it's not just the players. For some reason, Pochettino thought that Joe Scally is not as good as Nathan Harriel and Alex Freeman. And look, maybe we're getting away with some of these things now against Trinidad and Tobago and Saudi Arabia's B team. But now we're likely going to face Costa Rica in the quarterfinals. If we win that, Canada. If we win that, Mexico. We're actually going to be facing better teams now, and a lot of these mistakes will be punished. At the same time, Max Arsene down the left, it's unbelievable that he's getting minutes over John Tolkin. Now, John Tolkin is not a world-class left back by any means, but he's a better player than Max Arsene. There might be some people in this chat who are better players than Max Arsene. There are some players at TST I think are better than Max Arsene, right? And so not just that, let's talk about Agyemang. Why Agyemang continues to start and play? Well, partially because Damian Downs had been ill, partially because for whatever reason, Haji Wright was not rated. I realize that there's a potential Achilles injury for this game, But before that, Agyemang started as well when it should have been Damian Downs or Haji Wright, right? Josh Sargent left at home supposedly for football reasons. And look, you can argue Josh Sargent has not played well for the U.S. That's fair. He hasn't. He's also played much tougher teams. When was the last time that Josh Sargent played a team like Trinidad and Tobago? Probably when he played against Cuba and scored a brace 6 years ago, honestly. And so I think this would have been the tournament to give to Josh Sargent. Since Pepe and Balogun are both injured, you could have Sargent and you could have Downs there, right? You could say, look, Sargent, this is your last opportunity. All right. You're going to have this tournament. You're going to have to deliver, because if not, your World Cup chances are done. All right. And then you have Damian Downs there to push him. And if Damian Downs outshines him or outperforms him, fine. Then you've got your third striker for the World Cup. But everybody and their dog who knows even a little bit about soccer could tell you, even before he played for the US, that Patrick Agyemang is not remotely close to a national team striker. I have Charlotte fans in my mentions saying, we don't even like Agyemang for the national team. And they're biased towards Agyemang because of their Charlotte fandom. So here we are. For whatever reason, Pochettino seems to believe that Agyemang has what it takes to play for the national team, when it becomes more and more obvious with every game. This guy has the touch of a tronco, right? I mean, it's so obvious. Every time the ball goes to his feet, under any kind of pressure, he gives it away. His runs are very slow into the box. There were several crosses that went into the box that was just dying for an instinctive striker to run onto it and finish it. And Agyemang didn't do that many times, right? He can't combine well at any kind of speed. He needs 3, 4, 5 touches to sort of lumber towards the ball and try to hold somebody off. How is this guy even a professional player? And yet, and worse, how is he a national team player? How is he a national team starter? It's insane to me. And yet him and Arfsen continue to get minutes. You know, he said some of these guys that should have been there weren't there for footballing reasons. Really? Let's address this one by Michael Higuera, because he said this on Twitter as well. So it's a good time to address him. All right. This is called the take of the casual. Agyemang bad, but somehow has more goals for the national team than Sargent. People still twerk for Sargent. All right, let's address this. First of all, Agyemang has 4 goals, okay? 2 of those goals came in January Camp Cupcake, all right, against terrible, terrible teams. Josh Sargent doesn't get opportunities in Camp Cupcake because he's actually pushing himself at a decent level. Let's think about that for a second, right? 3 of Agyemang's 4 goals, if you actually watch his goals, 2 of them were weak, pathetic shots straight at the goalkeeper that ricocheted off some terrible goalkeepers and into the net. So that gets officially chalked down as a goal. But you watch that goal and tell me that was even remotely a goal of any quality. The 4th goal that he scored was Diego Luna's shot that ricocheted off of him into the back of the net. Okay, so let's be very honest. If you don't watch the game, if you don't understand the game and you go on FOTMOB ratings, or you just look at who, quote unquote, scored more goals, then sure, you will probably be of the opinion that somehow Agyemang is better than Josh Sargent, right? But if you actually watch soccer, or if you have even the most basic understanding of soccer, how many chances has, even yesterday, Agyemang blew a header one-on-one, right? He did it also against Trinidad and Tobago. He did it also against Turkey. All right. The amount of opportunities that this guy does get that he blows, the way he can't hold up the ball, can't combine, doesn't make good runs into the box when a cross is being played in. Look, Agyemang is at best an MLS level striker. Josh Sargent doesn't get to stat pad in Gold Cup. Josh Sargent doesn't get to stat pad in January camp. Now, that's not an excuse for Sargent. Sargent is at best 3rd, probably fighting for 3rd with Damian Downs, because Josh Sargent has generally not delivered for the national team. But the same people who will say Josh Sargent doesn't deliver for the national team, will somehow give Agyemang a pass. They'll say, yeah, well, you know, that goal ricocheted off of him, so he's somehow better than Sargent. Okay? Michael Higuera. It's better to be lucky than good. Sargent is a better player, but doesn't produce. Okay, here's the problem with luck, Michael, is luck runs out at some point. Over the long term, you know what's better than being lucky? Good. And Sargent has been unlucky at times, right? He actually scored a really good goal in his last game, but somebody else was offside, so it was chalked off, right? So whose fault is that? Is that Josh Sargent's fault? No. And the criticism of Sargents are fair. They are. And I've criticized him myself. You do have to deliver for the national team. But when you're talking about winning a Gold Cup, right? When you're talking about playing against better players, you need a guy who you know has better quality. And then you need to give him a little bit of leash and say, look, you're going to have the Gold Cup. All right. Downs is going to push you. And if you're shit and we bring you off and Downs comes on, then yeah, you're in trouble. But people have no problem giving Agyemang lots of leash on the excuse that he's young, which he's not. He's 24 years old. Okay. This is a guy who's not even prolific in MLS. And here we are. Here we are. So, I mean, have any opinion you want, but I'm telling you right now that the comparisons with Sargent and Agyemang, they're not close, right? What the fuck happened to Gio? He's not even at dad's level. Lots of things happened to Gio. Mostly what happened to him is injuries. Lots and lots of injuries over the last few years. That's a big one. Attitude, maybe. You can argue something about his attitude, although there are lots of reports to the contrary. Mostly, he is in limbo right now with Dortmund. But let's talk about Gio for a second. Does Gio make this team better? In my opinion, yes, he does. Now, what is happening to Gio? He's sitting at the bench at Dortmund in the Club World Cup. Did we even try to get him? Did we even try to bring him onto this team? No. Did we try to get Weah and McKennie from Juventus for the two friendlies, at least, Turkey and Switzerland? Did we try? No, because Poch wants to have the same roster, okay? But his same roster involves calling up a bunch of MLS players who have no business being anywhere near the national team and giving them opportunities over and over again, despite how they're playing. And when the fans go, they're shit. And the shills go, shut up and support the team. And then they play like shit. Where have we seen this before? Where have we saw this under Berhalter for years. And by the way, if you're not even good in the Gold Cup, how bad are you? Let me refer you back to Jesus Ferreira. We went through this with this guy, remember? 7 goals at the Gold Cup, back-to-back hat tricks. Alexi Lalas twerking on Fox Soccer for him, calling him our number one, right? Fans all over, MLS shills all over being like, at least he scores goals. That was the Gold Cup. Jesus Ferreira outperformed by a country mile Patrick Agyemang in the Gold Cup, right? And what happened when bald fraud, wife-kicking Greg Berhalter decided it would be a good time to bring Jesus Ferreira to the World Cup instead of Ricardo Pepi? What happened? One of the worst ever performances by a national team player against the Netherlands was Jesus Ferreira. It was so bad that Berhalter, who'd spent 2.5 years with a hard-on for Jesus Ferreira, had to pull him off at halftime and play the kid he hated so much, Gio Reyna, instead. So the moral of the story is, even if you're very, very good in Gold Cup, which, nobody has been so far outside of perhaps Chris Richards, it does not mean that you are a World Cup level player, right? Now, if you're very, very bad in Gold Cup, with which both Agyemang and Arfsen have been, why are you even in the conversation? Why are the people who show up trying to defend Patrick Agyemang when you can't even perform in the Gold Cup? These are the issues that we are dealing with. And it comes from a soft culture. We've talked about this many, many times. We have a very, very soft culture. In fact, the least soft, one of the most soft national teams on the planet in terms of criticism, right? Our whiny players. Tim Weah was whining about this the other day. He was. Let me see if I can pull this up, and then I'll get to this super chat here. But I want to pull this up because I want to address just how soft we are. Okay. Here it is. Let me pull this up here. All right. So this was Tim Weah the other day. It's, USMNT Otaku is the one who's putting it out there. He was talking to Sporting News on the recent, drama around Christian Pulisic. The situation with Christian is unfortunate. You have all these guys talking behind the scenes. Yes, it's called having a fan base and a media that cares. If people care, they're going to talk. And it's not behind the scenes, Mr. Weah. These are people who pay to buy tickets, who pay for merch, who watch on TV, who promote the team, who talk about the team to other players. So that phrase behind the scenes is an interesting one. I think that's an unfortunate one because they're not behind the scenes. They're literally the people for whom you have a job. Without these people, there are no national team. The fans and the media, that covers you, even if they cover it poorly. They're the reason that the fans are upset is because you have not delivered and not performed. So when you say behind the scenes, what you really mean is the people who pay to watch you play soccer. Okay? They're not behind the scenes. They're in the stadium using their eyes and their God-given brains to tell that your team sucks. Okay? Let's continue. At the end of the day, we just want to play football. Then why weren't you there for the two friendlies? Why didn't you badger Juventus to come and play in these two friendlies if you just want to play football? Right? Let's talk about that for a second. Since you just want to play football. Why did you get a red card in Copa America through a petulant, silly punch on a player that should never have happened? If you just wanted to play football, you wouldn't have done that so you could stay on the field and help us get out of the group, Mr. Tim. And I like Tim Weah. I think he's a good player and he's a starter for us. Okay, but let's not change the narrative about people criticizing the team. I think to question our love for the game, our love for the badge, it's kind of crazy, he says. But we've just got to let them speak and show out on the field. Do you see the bitterness in his voice? We just have to let them say what they want. That's correct, sir. Welcome to land of the free, home of the brave, where people can say what they want, where fans who pay $250 for a mediocre seat in the stadium, who spend $120 on the fan appreciation jerseys, who buy the $29 pretzel and the $17 beer. Yes, they are allowed to say what you want. Yes. When you become the first nation in history, the first host nation in history to get grouped at Copa America, fans can say what they want. Yes, when you finish fourth place in Nations League, fans will criticize you. And to make it worse, we see these players play well for their clubs, right? We see them play well for their clubs. So we know it's not a quality problem. Sure, we don't have world-class players, but we have players that are good enough to beat Panama at home. We have players that are good enough to win Nations League, to win Gold Cup. We've seen this before. So then the next conversation is naturally going to become, do they even care? And then you have Tim Weah being like, I just don't understand these people behind the scenes. These people are criticizing our commitment. Your boy Christian Pulisic is golfing right now and making pasta with his girl instead of representing the national team. So yes, the criticism is going to happen. Yes, it is fair. But you're right about one thing. We have to let them speak and show out on the field. You know what stops people from criticizing you? Playing well, winning games, winning trophies, and showing up wearing that badge like you give a fuck, Tim, because you cared more about your little spat with some Panama player in Copa America than representing the badge. So nobody, it's not crazy. And I'm sorry, if any of these players, if any of them think that the criticism that they are receiving right now is too harsh, I promise you, there is less criticism on pressure on this national team than any other national team in the world, with the exception of maybe Palau. Less. This is absolute. There was more pressure on the Indian national team when I lived there than there is on this team. I'm serious. There is more pressure in Thailand, and India and Thailand haven't qualified for World Cups ever. And yet there's still more pressure on their national teams, from what I saw from the media coverage and the fan coverage, than this U.S. men's national team has ever received. This soft mentality. And by the way, Tim, you were the guy who, after you played a big part in us not getting out of our group in Copa America, were playing whiny little victim. Remember him being like, oh, people are trying to paint me as a violent person just because of that one punch. I'm not a violent person. Nobody said you were a violent person. People were mad at you, okay? People were mad at you for ruining our chances by getting sent off early in a game that we could have won and maybe qualified in that game itself, and then the Uruguay result wouldn't have mattered. And frankly, the criticism that you got was very mild, because a lot of the criticism went on Greg Berhalter. So this is just pure, soft, pathetic whininess from Tim Weah, who I like as a player, but we have to start calling out these bullshit, weak mentalities that our players bring to the table, including some of our key players, like Fat Weston McKennie, Tim Weah, and Christian Pulisic. Okay? Absolute nonsense. Mikel Antonio's playing for Jamaica, and the guy's been injured for most of the season. If anybody has a reason to take the summer off, it's him. Nope. He's representing. Alphonso Davies has a torn ACL, but he's at the stadium dapping up the boys and wanting to be a part of the whole thing. So I quote tweeted this tweet with essentially what I've said to you. Maybe when you generally play well for clubs but become the first home nation to crash out of Copa America and then finish fourth in Nations League, people are going to question your commitment. This is still way less criticism and pressure than any other national team, which is the truth. But let us continue. Let's move on. We've got some super chats to read here. Talk about producing. Gio produces for the national team, but the same people who defend Agyemang want Gio banished. Exactly. It's a double standard. Josh Sargent doesn't produce for the national team. Get rid of him. Agyemang doesn't produce either. Oh, he has a few fluky goals, a rebound goal. He's the man. Gio Reyna, don't like him. Don't like him at all. Exactly right, Frank. Exactly right. I wish there was more consistency there. But unfortunately, a lot of it is Don Garber dick sucking and MLS shilling. And so you can't think clearly. Let's see what Falcon has to say. Thank you for the super chat, Falcon. Weak-minded fans that defend the actions of our entitled players are the problem too. 100%. 100%. Thank you, Falcon. They say they need to rest. No! They are professional athletes, not 8-year-olds. They owe respect to their fans. Yes, and the context is, here's the thing. If we had gone to the semifinal of Copa America and then won Nations League, I think fans would have been a little bit more forgiving about Pulisic taking the Gold Cup off. I think they would have been. Okay? But, and I'm just going to say it, they owe the fans a trophy. After a year of wretched failure, taking time off to golf in Miami is not a good look. Fans have every right to be angry and disappointed because they feel let down by this team, right? They feel let down by this team. And there are many guys who have played more minutes than Christian Pulisic. Many guys playing in Europe who are playing for their national teams right now, okay? Lots of them, whether it was in friendlies or whether it was World Cup qualifying or Nations League. 40-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo was playing injured for Portugal in Nations League. Injured, but he can't wait to represent Portugal, and he ended up, winning the Nations League. We don't have that culture here. We don't have a culture of accountability. We don't have a culture of criticism. In fact, that culture mostly comes from a good part of the fan base, a lot of whom interact with us because they sense that, we actually want this team to have some level of accountability, because our media certainly doesn't do it. A little bit here and there. Usually when things get really bad, they'll pop up and act like they were criticizing the whole time. But then the rest of the time, they were actually criticizing fans for trying to hold this team to some accountability. This is a cycle that happens over and over again. through all of World Cup qualifying is like, shut up and trust the coach. Berhalter's figuring it out with a young team. And then when the fans turn out to be right and the team falls apart, it's, what are we doing? What a disaster. How did we get here? Well, maybe the fans have been telling you this for a long time, but you were too busy shitting on the people that pay $4.99 for your silly articles. And now it turns out the fan base was right the whole time. So this is what we have. Now, let's not make this all negative. We, did the absolute bare minimum of qualifying out of our Gold Cup group, but it's about to get tougher. And before we get on to, the knockouts, we will face Haiti. I'm going to cover that game. But thank you, Falcon. I'm going to talk a little bit before we leave here about what I think we should do against Haiti. Because I think we should use it to prepare for the knockouts properly. Pete, take some vitamin C. I'm guessing you're referring to my pale skin. I'm guessing. Thank you for the advice, Len. I take vitamin C every day. I don't think it actually does enough for the skin. Nate, it's if Down starts and gets about 80 minutes, do you think he scores? I feel he can maybe get 2, but I'd like to hear your opinion. I mean, maybe he can score, right? We have to give him a shot. I thought the few minutes that he got yesterday, he looked good, and I think he should start against Haiti, particularly now that Haji Wright is out, right? So, yeah, I would give Damian Downs those minutes. I want him to play well, and I want him to score goals when opportunities arrive. But we're looking for an upgrade on Agyemang, and frankly, that's not hard. So I think we should let Damian Downs start against Haiti, no question. Sick the kid. Honest question. Did Mexico bring an A squad? Mostly, yes. Mostly they did bring an A squad. Most teams brought their A squad except for us. Because we don't think we have to put effort into winning the Gold Cup despite, not having a trophy in several years and despite the last year of the disaster. It's a problem. And why do you think Austin does not have a big stadium? That's an MLS stadium, 20K. And we can't even fill it up for the national team. And then we wonder why not. Prices are too high. Product is too shit. People are getting tired of this team. But is U.S. Soccer listening? Nope. They'd rather fleece the diehards for $450 than listen to their fan base. Because as we all know, U.S. Soccer has zero interest in growing the game in this country. In fact, I would argue that U.S. Soccer is actually adverse to growing the game in this country. Because if the game becomes an actual real sport in this country where people actually care and it's covered by the mainstream, they will get way significantly more criticism and accountability than they ever do now. They don't want that. They don't want that at all. They want to do just enough, right? Just enough to justify their little salaries and maintain their power. That's what U.S. Soccer wants. They have no interest in growing the game in this country. That is actually bad for them and for their aims and goals. Their aims and goals is fleece the diehards, just fleece those diehards in every city and try to make a tidy little profit, meet our budget. We all get fat salaries and we get to remain in control of the game and of the narrative. They will do this to the degree that they'll have prominent people in their organization talk to me in TAC and essentially tell us that we need to start towing the party line and then act all butthurt when we say, no, not going to happen. Not going to happen. We're going to say what we think. And if you don't like it, go F yourselves. Right? And it is sad and unfortunate that it is the fans that have to treat this team and this sport like a proper sport in our country because our media and federation will not. Most of the fair criticism that this team receives comes from the fans. Some of the fans, a sector of the fans. I would argue it is a growing sector, though. I'd argue it's a growing sector. Let's talk about the Haiti game, okay? The Haiti game should be used to prepare the team for the rest of the tournament, okay? I would probably start Chris Brady in that game, and I'll tell you why. Is there a big gap between, I thought that, Matt Freese did a decent job. None of our goalkeepers are exceptional. Chris Brady needs to be cap-tied. He's still a young enough goalkeeper at 21 that we don't know how good he's going to be. And he also has dual national citizenship with Scotland. Okay, so I think we should take this opportunity. Chris Brady's been playing very, very well in MLS this year. I think we give him that game as a show of good faith that we like him and that we think he's a part of this future. And let's be honest, Haiti isn't going to provide a significant threat anyways. So give Chris Brady that game. He is playing with the ball at his feet in MLS, especially now under Greg Berhalter, right? And he's playing very well. Shot stopping has been excellent. He's continuing to grow. He's a young goalkeeper. I think that we need to give Chris Brady that game. I also think we need to start John Tolkien at left back finally and let him show that he is in fact better than Max Arfson. Maybe not significantly better, but definitely better at the margins. He's a better crosser of the ball. He's better in tight spaces. He's more technically sound. He's got fewer cheap giveaways. He's better 1v1 defendingly, from a defensive point of view. And I also think we should start Damian Downs in that game and sit Big Pat on the bench where he belongs. Well, frankly, he doesn't even belong on the bench. He belongs at home in Charlotte, but he's here. And now Haji Wright is injured. And again, now we're losing Haji Wright. For how long? Who knows? But that comes down to roster construction. Yeah, you're going to have injuries. We didn't have any wide players on this team. Why wasn't Griffin Yao brought to give us some wide play? We're playing Jack McGlynn as a winger when everybody knows that he is not a winger. If you want him on the field, he's good and better in a double pivot centrally where he can distribute, spray balls, score the occasional long-range goal, right? So it is what it is. I think that's how we should approach Haiti. Let Johnny and Adams play, in the middle. McKenzie and Richards play there. And then, I would probably start Luna on the left. I'd probably start Quinn Sullivan on the right because I thought he was a little bright against some of the, the friendlies we played against Turkey and against Switzerland. I don't think he's ever going to be a very high ceiling player, but he's a wide player that can at least put in a good cross and works hard and has shown more. And it's just not the spot for Jack McGlynn, right? And then up top, play Damian Downs. And then you have Tillman, Adams, and Cardoso in the middle. Now that's a decent team that you think, okay, maybe they could do something, going forward. But if I keep bringing it back to roster construction, where's Joe Scally? Where's Cameron Carter-Vickers? Believe me, he's a better defender than Walker Zimmerman. I'll tell you that right now. Where's Nathaniel Brown, who we failed to recruit? Why not bring Tessman and Busio, who would actually look good against some of these players? Why not bring Josh Sargent? Why not bring Alejandro Zendejas? Why not bring Griffin Yao? Zendejas and Yao would be actual proper wide players, so we're not playing a central midfielder out wide. And now we've lost Haji Wright, who is also a guy that can play on the left wing. The roster construction was very poor, and we said this when the roster came out, and we're probably going to suffer for it as a result, right? So, yeah, why didn't we recruit Henri Chase and give him this Gold Cup as an opportunity? If he can play in the Bundesliga, he can absolutely play in the Gold Cup. But I'll tell you why. Because this is an MLS tour, right? Dude, stop complaining to complain. Zimmerman hasn't even played. First of all, Zimmerman did play and start against Switzerland and looked terrible. I never complain to complain. I complain to spit facts, my friend. Okay? And Zimmerman shouldn't even be anywhere near a national team. I've been saying this for years. All right? And guess what? Chris Richards goes down. Who do you think's going to come on? Walker Zimmerman. Roster construction matters. Who's on the bench matters. Because injuries happen. Red cards happen. You need to change a game sometimes, right? 2025, backing Zimmerman. Oh my God, I know. Crazy. How long in the future do you think the youth players will be introduced to the team? With Pochettino in charge, I don't see him really incorporating anybody before the World Cup. Daniel Reyes. McGlynn has been playing right wing for Houston the whole season. Just because Houston plays him there doesn't mean he's a right winger, Daniel Reyes. He has been a central midfielder his entire life, right? And guess what? That's MLS. That has very little to do with the national team, okay? You can get away with lots of things in MLS. You can get away with having terrible, terrible defenders, and that's okay in MLS too. That is not the standard by which we should be judging our players. Miles Robinson is a good center back in MLS. That doesn't mean he should be on the national team. Right? So here we are. we got through. We got our 6 points. Let's use the Haiti game to actually put together a competent team. Shouldn't we rest our starters versus Haiti? Depends who you call the starters, David. A lot of the guys that are playing now should not be starters, right? So it is what it is. I've heard McGling is right wing at Houston in name only. Dorsey has the freedom to dominate that space. I haven't watched a lot of Houston Dynamo, right? Very, very honestly. So you might be right. It is what it is, guys. We were poor. Chris Richards stepped up on both sides of the ball and got us that win. And now we need to actually start putting some of the better players on the field and doing our best. But we have some tough opponents coming up as we progress through this tournament, right? And as we continue with some of the players that are on the field, we will get punished. We will. But let's see what happens. Thanks for hanging, guys. Again, apologies for not being able to do this yesterday. But, now we have to, this morning, I wanted to do something at least. I'm going to be in Sequoia National Forest for the Haiti game at an Airbnb, but I will still cover it. I will take time off of my 2 days off to cover the game, and hopefully we'll get a good game. Hopefully we don't see the same copy and paste lineup that we saw in these last 2 games. All right, guys, have a great rest of your Friday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you all on Sunday.